allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, you want to do a roll, please?
Walther?
Here.
Carter?
Here.
Hayes? Here.
All right. Okay, so I have not looked at our agenda yet. Not a topic of discussion at this meeting, okay.
I went ahead and left those on there. I've got my cheat sheet. It makes it a lot
I
easier
like
to
it.
leave them on there.
That's a great idea.
It does, yeah, actually.
Okay.
does it.
What, so you, I know with the Oak Meadow last, you'd had the 50%, you'd gotten your review comments, given those back. Where are we with going to the 90%? What do you think we're,
We have started that, and my question was for you. I'd sent you the structure point review, to see
Yeah.
if you had any
I
questions.
can't print off, you're gonna have to give me a hard copy of that so I can look at it.
Okay.
If I can, if I get a hard copy from you.
Oh,
I've got the old one, probably the 30% that you gave me the last time.
Okay.
So
So
if
did
you-
you tell me that wouldn't print or something, or did I just?
I thought I might have emailed you, but maybe I didn't.
Okay.
In your
I
head.
was to say, I missed it if you did.
That's fine, all my
Okay.
text messages.
So they're going ahead and moving towards 90%. Columbia Gas is doing their pothole work to figure where they're, if they're in conflict and see what moves they have to make. We are tentatively looking at next Wednesday to do our potholing. We're probably gonna do, get like Feed Corps in here to do
the water
hydro
line.
excavate for the water line. Yes.
Okay.
The only other, so they're moving forward on design based on that, or once we have that information. And the only other information I have is I did stop and talk to the one a resident that will need an easement from, let them know that the existing pipe goes through their yard, that it's probably gonna start failing soon, and it'd be in their best interest as well as ours to just give us an easement and let us replace it effectively.
The existing pipe is not in an easement,
Not, so I have
not that
found
we can find?
correct.
Perfect. Okay.
So they seemed at least willing to listen. I gave them my card, asked them to follow up. If I don't hear anything in the next week or two, I'll follow up with them.
Okay, all right.
That's all I got
Um,
specifically.
Okay, you have Graham and Calmore not a topic, but can you just give us a, where are we with, I know we are looking at, it's more of Graham Road than Calmore at this point.
Correct.
So it's really Graham Road drainage. Anything going on with that?
The plan, of course, is to do engineering this year. I was gonna wait a little bit longer, a little bit later in the year, once we get a couple other things out and moving before we put that out for engineering. And the only other thing besides that is Mr. Walraff, the property owner to the north, has gave me contact information for Mr. Fife's son. He believes he's a little more reasonable to work with, so I'm gonna contact him. I'll let him know that what his father has done to block off the drainage is technically illegal, and see if we can work some kind of resolution to get that back open and flowing again.
Okay. Great, okay, so this one looks like it might be on the topic. Retention, detention, basin inventory and analysis, where do we stand with that?
Yes. We are working with Jobs to finish up the proposed ordinance amendment. I don't think there were any comments, or the comments that the street committee did have, and I guess I forgot to bring that down here with me. We were looking to incorporate those and working on the wording to get those. Hopefully by the next street committee, we'll have something a little more concrete and worked out for that one.
Gotcha.
Aside from that.
Basically, so everybody knows, and I think this was last year, we really talked about this, so,
Right.
Suzanne, we are trying to put together an ordinance that, I don't know, gives the city some teeth in making sure the retention, detention,
With
people,
associations.
holders, owners, whatever, have to do something if they're asked to do it, or, you know, there's some results.
It's more
if they have-
specific instead of being wide open.
Well, there isn't
For
anything right now,
interpretation.
basically.
Nothing.
Well, but that's what you're trying to
Right.
get to.
Yeah, we're
right?
trying to give the city some teeth to get results when they ask for help from owners. Okay. Anything else on that? And I'm sorry, Mel, Suzanne, if you guys had any questions on this first one, I kind of
No,
ran
you're
through them
fine.
real quick. Just move through stuff here.
Only other thing on that one is we're working with Jobs to look at the scope of putting together together some exhibits, documents to get proposals from contractors for the 2 that we were looking to do this year. Looking to see if we can do that under the engineering retainer, or if we need a more specific proposal to put those together.
And if I remember correctly, didn't Streets Committee have some questions about the 2 that you brought to us for looking into that? I thought we had a couple questions on those 2.
I don't recollect that specifically. Oh, what was, because you asked about the north one, the one on Hazelwood. I remember the question, but I evidently did not write it down in the right place.
Okay, well, I brought my file with me, so we'll resurrect that after the meeting here.
Okay.
I thought I had my.
Do we, if I'm not incorrect, Mel, do you remember that we had some questions about 2 of them, and one of them was whether it was a civil or a city
Yes.
issue? And if we were gonna go try to fix something that really might have been a civil issue rather than
Right,
a
if
city
it was
issue.
something that,
That's what I recall, but we'll,
Okay.
we can look at our notes.
Okay. So we'll come back to that then.
Yep.
Okay.
Bristol Drive, not a topic, I'm gonna leave that alone, because I think that was not a topic today.
Okay, yeah, next one's just, we're still trying to get out there for survey, which hopefully we can do next week is what we're looking at.
For the culvert replacement, what do we,
Bristol is the,
yeah, is the old one that was done, wasn't that the one that was looked at several years ago and kinda, we had a plan from Stantec that showed the field, the tile that didn't work? That's what I kinda remembered at Bristol. I don't
it
think
was
it-
from Stantec. They basically had an exhibit that showed putting under drains below the ditches.
Right, tile and.
And there was no plans associated with that, and we couldn't find anything that it was based on. So we done some survey, but we didn't get all the way to the receiving stream, if you wanna call it that, to know what the elevation is the ditch is, because right now I'm doubting that we can even get an under drain.
That's what I mean, it's not functional. The plan that was,
That's what we
the
believe.
exhibit that was put forward doesn't work.
That's what I believe to be true.
That's what I
We're trying to
recall.
verify that.
All right, well, we'll wait to hear what you come up with on that.
Okay.
Let's go back for that for just a second, because we've had so much rain here in February, I mean, we've all witnessed that. Did you get any more calls from anybody over there, or did you get a chance to go out there and look at that to see how, I mean, obviously, this person has come forward from a complaint that he had 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, or whatever, and now brought it forward to now. Is there anything, are you seeing anything that's, like, maybe a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, when it was raining 6 inches of rain?
I have not looked. My understanding with this one the whole time is it's not actually flooding anybody's houses or anything like that. It's
Just front
that
yards?
The ditches, they just lay wet. So it'll drain out during a storm, but there's so little slope that there's spots that just lay wet.
The other thing I'm gonna show you too, I'll bring a sample, I've got, on a golf course, we use this stuff called flat tile.
Okay?
You ever seen flat tile?
No.
It's an inch thick,
Okay?
and it's about 12 inches wide.
Uh-huh.
And it works just like drain tile, but it's for issues when you have elevation issues
Yeah.
to get it to work. I'll bring you a sample of it to show you that.
So is it basically just almost like a paver just to keep your,
You put it underneath, you put it in sand bunkers basically at times when you
Okay.
don't have enough room to get the water out to your storm.
okay?
So it's like literally an inch thick,
Uh-huh.
and it collects the water and runs the water. Anyhow, I'll bring you a sample of it.
Okay.
It may be an option for Bristol.
Interesting, okay.
Save you 6 to 8 inches of fall. So
Yeah. That might be
Okay.
enough to do it.
that might just do it. Flat tile. All right. Clubby Road culvert replacement, you guys are done with it. I mean, other than the work that has to be done in the spring, correct?
Right.
Okay. And we got the ordinance last week to pay for the extras on that.
Correct.
Columbia Bridge replacement, anything on that? Although, I will tell you, the 35-mile-an-hour sign over there,
Yeah.
that's not legal, where they have it. They have the 35-mile-an-hour sign on the bridge guardrail,
Yeah.
and it's only sitting about 4.5 feet off the ground. Those have a minimum of 5.5, or even, it might even be 6 feet minimum to the bottom of the sign. So,
I'll be sure.
if we
to
want,
look
if
up
we
that.
want to write tickets to ORC, you better have the sign right.
I will be sure to let ODOT know.
Yeah, it was a nice try.
That's an ODOT thing?
Well, that was an ODOT bridge.
It's
Well-
ODOT's managing that project, so they,
They have a short pole, they just stick that, I mean,
so it's their contractor, basically their contractor probably tried to get away with it, and ODOT inspectors just didn't catch it.
didn't catch it.
But-
Yeah. You'll see it if you drive that way, don't you, Alan?
What's that?
You drive that way,
I
right?
do.
You'll see it.
Yeah,
As
I
you're
have
coming-
seen it, now
yeah.
that you mention it. I
Southbound.
wasn't even thinking about the height
Yeah,
requirements.
but since we're gonna be writing for Licking County to do them, they'll throw that out just like that. It's easy. I've
Yeah.
gotten lots of speeding tickets thrown out just because of the height of the sign. It's true. So,
For short people, we need signs
it's
that are.
not about short people.
I mean, you go with the rib problem, but it's really short.
It's not about the low cars either. It has nothing, it doesn't discriminate.
No smart cars.
Doesn't discriminate at all. Okay. Anything else on that?
No.
Okay. Taylor Road culvert replacement,
Yep, and of course, that one's done now, so
that's probably a nut topic.
that's pretty much all the alter report on that. That
Don't
was
you
on
like
our.
saying that?
Yes, yes, I do.
And now it's even smoother through there even. I mean, like,
They did a great
they
job.
really did a great job for such a short amount of time, because when I saw it was
Yeah.
open early, I was like, wow, yay, but then I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And my car, you feel everything, it was really, I was very impressed with how,
I'm glad
Well,
you
they
guys
did
picked
that.
Spanco.
Yeah, I've
They're
never
excellent.
worked with Spinco before, but.
Oh, yeah, I do a lot of stuff with them.
Okay, yeah, they did a great job.
yeah,
Very
it was
impressed.
really good,
Yeah.
so.
The only comment I have is if you're planning on overlaying that road, I mean, bringing the concrete to the surface is gonna be tougher.
And I went back and forth in my mind on that one, obviously with plants
Yeah.
being closed, we didn't want to spend the extra money. So it just in general, I've been going back and forth on using concrete to do the culvert replacements because it does stay smoother, it doesn't settle. So that's the nice part, but yeah, if you're doing an overlay or doing other things,
Well-
it makes it more difficult.
When they do that crossing correctly, they'll take the slope out further, so they'll just fill over top of it. That slope is a little bit, the grades typically, when they go back and redo they'll take that grade and take it further out, hopefully cover it up. I'm talking about the steepness of the grade going up to the railroad tracks.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll do that, anyhow, yeah, they did a nice job on that. And from what I gathered in the council meeting, it cost a little bit more to do it the way we did it, is that correct?
Actually, it costs less.
Okay, so I was trying to figure that out. They were the second bidder on the Taylor Road project,
Mhm.
and it cost us less? How was that?
So originally, we were planning to use, so what's in there now is a 60-inch, or what was in there was a 60-inch corrugated metal pipe.
Right.
We didn't want to go with corrugated metal, but we wanted to stay with the 60-inch and not downsize the pipe. To do that, I was gonna go with reinforced concrete, because there's so little cover over the pipe. And
But
sort of
since
on
you
the strip.
encased it,
And we were gonna encase it. So, because this was an emergency, we went ahead and downsized to a 48-inch plastic pipe, HDPE, which per the, Manning's equation with the end value is so much lower that it actually flows more than a corrugated pipe did. So we have a higher flow rate with the
A smaller-
plastic,
Wow.
even though it's a smaller pipe, just because of the roughness of it. So I didn't want to downsize the pipe, even though I knew we could originally.
so it was cheaper because we used plastic pipe.
It was cheaper because we used a smaller and plastic,
Good.
correct.
Okay. I was trying to figure that out on the last one, we were talking about it, and it didn't make
Yeah.
any sense, so.
Yeah, no, and in general, I don't like to downsize pipes unless it's absolutely necessary, even if it does have the same flow rate.
Okay, great. Headley's Mill, looks like that's not a topic. I've been down through there, it doesn't look like they're having any more erosion right now.
No, it seems to be holding up. I've contacted the Army Corps, working with Jobs to try and put something together, because it will take an Army Corps permit to do what I wanna do, which is basically
Straighten it.
put the creek back to what it used to be, right?
Okay. Okay, 2018 rate.
I don't think we originally were gonna talk about this, but I noticed a slight discrepancy, I guess.
Math?
Well, the discrepancy is in when we put out when I read the newsletter. The newsletter says we're gonna do a chip and seal with repairs on Headley's Mill for the entire length. So considering that, along with, do you know Zach Helm with Strouser? He put on a thing that Jason and I attended here a few months back. He offered to come out and take a look at some of our roads and, give an opinion on them. So I took him up on that, and one of his concerns was if we just either overlay or mill and fill, some of those problems are deeper than that. So considering those two things, I took another look, and this actually should say option 4. I didn't change the header on that,
This was option
for Headley's Mill. And it was basically just trying to maximize the surface repair, and then do a double chip and seal, which is a little bit cheaper than what we talked about before. With what we talked about before, one of my major concerns was that we're only putting one layer, and that's gonna, everything's gonna reflect through that. So with this, if we took care of a lot of the pavement surface areas that are bad, and I think a lot of it is surface, I did leave some base repair in there, which would be needed. And then chip and seal, we might stop some of that reflective, and for a little bit less money, we would make it maybe even last a little bit, maybe the same if not a little bit longer is I'm shooting for. So maybe we don't need to make a decision on that now. Maybe once we get an engineer on board, they can weigh in and give us their take on it. But just something else to consider that I thought about. I feel like I'm waffling to some extent, but it's just trying to get the best solution as we keep
I know.
moving forward and looking at different things.
I'm all out of sorts, I can't find my notes from the last 2 meetings. Which option did we decide to go with? Cause I
Last
feel like
time-
we went back and forth a number of times.
Last time we decided on option 3,
Okay.
but it was just halfway.
That's right, okay.
We were gonna engineer the whole thing,
Correct.
but we were going to do 50% or
There you go.
somewhere in that ballpark. We were gonna find a place where it made sense to do half, plus some additional surface repairs on the other half,
That's
if we
right.
could get them to fit into the budget.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what and no chip and seal at all on that run.
Right.
And that one we figured was gonna cost about
That was
$320,000.
Well, yeah, something like that, right?
That was I'm just reading off my notes.
Okay.
But anyhow, whatever that was gonna be, it was gonna be less than this option,
True.
but it was going to be, and that option 3,
Which I did not print those out. I do have a copy here.
You gave us a little.
that was a scratch with a, with a full surface on it, right?
Let's see.
Let's see here, I'll try to read through here to find it.
Option 3, we had 2% base repair, 10% surface repair, and then basically an overlay. We talked about
Inch and a
taking the
half,
chip
right.
seal out, right? So there's a lot less surface repair, and of course, every time I drive it, I see something new. With this option that I just gave you, which like I said should be option 4, that would account for, at 25%, that'd be about a mile's worth of surface repair, which I think would go a long way. So a lot of different ways to skin that cat, I guess. Shouldn't talk about skinning cats in public meeting, but it's catfish.
Well, and I noticed also, Alan, your options seem to be, the numbers, the totals seem to be going down a little bit. Did you change some quantities? Like option 1 you had, this first one was 460, now it's 446. And option 3, you had is 710 originally, and now it's 678.
That might have been an error. I don't,
Because I don't know that we changed the roadway.
I did not intend to change any of the previous options.
Well, here, I've got my copies here if you want to see them.
I've got mine right here as well.
Okay. Under your summary of the ramp,
Yes, I see that.
they went down, let's see, 14.
Okay.
Looks like there's a percentage of some type here that it went down.
I wonder if I was messing with stuff in the spreadsheet and didn't realize that I changed that, trying to optimize. That's the only thing I can think of. I didn't think I changed anything in that, so.
Andy, I'm driving myself crazy. Is that in your January notes
So-
or your December?
This was,
January
we had a
22nd.
It was
worksheet.
January's.
Yeah, we had this worksheet that came out.
Yep.
This is one I made a copy of for you. Yep.
Okay.
Here's one.
two.
So you can see.
Thanks.
These option numbers
Are
seem to
different.
have changed in this one here, which could be just in your spreadsheet.
Right.
The reason why I'm asking is because then that number, that changes and we're only doing half of it, then
Then that makes a big difference. Okay.
Right.
I got you.
And, well, I guess, I'm with you on waiting on to see what you get a consultant on board to see, let's make a decision on that, because no matter how you slice and dice this, we're still over by a substantial amount.
Right.
it's gonna be hard to, what's our budget,
650.
650, so we're 130 over, and I don't know how we, I mean, I think the roads we've identified are ones that need to be done. I don't think we can do half of a chip and seal. And it, I mean, yep, let's see where that comes out.
Yep.
What, where are you with getting the ramp out?
The RFP is out.
Okay.
I got that out last Tuesday.
Okay,
I have got a couple questions here and there, nothing too major. And the deadline is the 23rd or 24th, whatever that Friday is.
well, I've got my handy dandy calendar, 23rd.
23rd is a Friday.
23rd.
Great, okay. Any other questions on the ramp? All right, drainage projects. This is I know you were going to put together a priority,
Yeah, and that list was already prioritized. We were running towards the end of that last meeting, I think, and I didn't remember, and I wanted to go back and double check, but I had prioritized that list from my perspective.
so
In
that we're all talking
general-
about the same thing, this is the 218 list that you gave us, right?
Yes, and that's I tried to look at it from a cost
I'm sorry, the
benefit
212 list,
perspective. Yes,
the 212 list, where we have it's called major drainage issues.
yes.
Okay,
So yeah, I tried to look at that as a cost benefit and also as, you know, whether they were public infrastructure or not.
okay. Any updates on that?
Specifically, no.
Okay, so this was one also, and I may be, I may have had the retention, I'm sorry. Yeah, the detention retention one mixed up here. This is the one I think we were talking about whether it was civil or city.
Which one?
This is the drainage issues. We were talking about whether they were city problems or,
Well, and that would be part of our discussion here to see, yeah, if there's something we should take on, or not. And if the streets committee's prioritization was the same as what I prioritized them, and if there was any differences, and then of course, discussing the potential funding options would be the final part of that, I think.
okay, well, how to tackle that? Because obviously, we're not overly familiar with these individual drainage issues to tell you which one's a priority and which one's not.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
You want me to
Cause,
do that?
some of them I drive through every day, but some of these other ones I just don't see as much.
I can give you the Cliff's Notes rundown if we wanna take the time to do that now.
Well, I think,
Just based on discussions, and I think that they're probably in the order in which we've been discussing them the most. I mean, the ones that stand out are the ones that you have first and second.
Okay, this is a newbie question. Do we have someone that evaluates the state of each road, like an engineer or somebody that, so that way when they're put on the ramp, we know that the one at the top is the worst compared to the one at the bottom? Like, is there an assessment done?
for drainage, or for,
Well, I guess I'm asking a ramp, like, but anything that we do with streets, do we have an assessment by someone, whether it be our own area, or whether or not it's engineers that assess it and decide what goes first?
I would say that Alan and the Public Service Department does that as we.
Regardless of whether it's ramp,
And I would tell you-
that's a newbie question, like,
So for the ramp was more or less already in place when I got here. It was, it's a 2-year cycle on the ramp. So, the first summer I was here, 2016, I went through, with a little bit of help from Jobs Henderson, Jason and I, aside from that, went through, drove every road, and I created, which I don't think I've given that to Streets Committee recently, a prioritization where I broke it down into a couple different different categories and tried to rate them
So
based
you're
on
rating them, okay,
ADT and, average daily traffic
okay,
and, the condition, so,
okay.
that's what
And the
that was
same
based
kind of for drainage, like you're rating them, you're set,
Drainage is a different,
or is it like a need when
game.
it happens and you see it over?
Right
When
now,
we
we're
just started that,
I'm trying to get to the proactive side, but we're still in reactive, right?
That's not a criticism, that's just me trying to figure out more, like
No, like right now, if you ask me how many culverts we have, I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
We've got our GIS set up now, so that we're inventorying those. And I told the guys, don't worry whether it's excellent, fair, poor, just tell me if it's bad, and then we'll get those and we'll come back and,
Okay.
and then we'll
with the others.
work on our assessment more. And so that we're, not just like, oh crap, this culvert's failing, we're trying to get out of that,
Okay.
reactionary
Let's,
state.
let's talk about the Oak Meadow stuff. I know that there's been some work with Jim and yourself, going out and observing the, as you say, your potential tile blockages. Have we gotten anything, are we any further along with that?
Yes,
Okay.
I actually put that as a separate, thing on the, agenda, but if you wanna go into that now as part of this, more than happy to.
Well, let's, Broadview Crossing Drain, okay, so in your, that one's getting some attention, even though it's third
Yes.
on your list. And one is obviously moving down the path for engineering
Yes,
and talking to the residents. Let's talk about Taylor Road drainage improvements.
okay,
I mean, that's, looks like it's a pretty big, issue. Give us the, you've got two different numbers here, and I'm just quickly reading this. So larger capacity storm at 250,000, and then you've got, you're looking at a retention pond?
I think that could help, like I said, these are all in their,
Where would we?
Preliminary stages.
Pond
there's some, empty property along the south side of Klima Drive. Like I said, this would be ideal, I don't know how realistic it is.
be? Right.
Because the problems here, during heavy rain events, Taylor Road will flood, especially in the area of Berry Road. And there are, so a couple years ago before I was here, there was further down south on Taylor Road, there was a resident that was worked with to put the ditch in on the west side of Taylor Road. There's two pipes there, and then the ditch goes off to the west. Getting to that ditch, I believe, my understanding is there's two 12-inch tiles, one on either side of the road. And those ones, the two problems that I believe are happening, one is the capacity of those. I don't know the condition of them, I think they're pretty old, so between whether it's 12 inches isn't big enough or they're old, they don't seem to be able to handle that capacity. The other challenge is, even if they can handle the capacity, do we have enough elevation to get that water out of there quickly? So is it just the water in the receiving stream's backed up, so the water upstream doesn't have anywhere to go? So even if we give it, 24-inch pipes, is it still not gonna get out of there because it can't get there? So that's the reason I went with the retention pond option. If we could manage that, then I think holding it back would be better than just trying to push it out, because one, it may not push out, or two, maybe we're flooding something downstream instead of where it is now.
Yeah, cause on really bad times, I mean, that will take out the intersection of Broad and Taylor. I've probably seen that 4 really bad times.
Well, and this,
One was just last
Yeah.
year.
this was focused even more to the north of
Yeah,
that.
this is up north of that.
Yeah.
For that location, I know we had that during the 125-year event that we had last summer. I didn't know that it had flooded any other times besides that.
Yeah, and I mentioned this, a couple of meetings ago, I think, when COTC renovated that building
Mhm.
and purchased it. And I wanna say it was when I first came on council and I had mentioned, cause we had a big flood there. And the road was blocked off and it was really bad. Somebody said to me, because COTC was supposed to put in some sort of drainage from the Taylor Road side off to Broad Street, kinda under their parking lot,
Yes.
kinda number, and that they hadn't done that.
I don't know if that's true or not.
It is
Or-
there, because after you said that, Jason and I took a look, that next Friday, and yeah, it's there. The pipe
Okay.
runs from, the creek where it is there on Taylor Road and empties on the
Under Broad.
north side of Broad Street before it
Okay.
goes under Broad. So that's there at least. And yeah, there you go. Scott said he designed it, so.
Oh, well then, Well, then I'm trusting it works, yes? Okay.
But you probably have the same issue with the outflow is not
Exactly.
adequate, under Broad Street, which
That's what,
then
yeah.
backs, same idea on this is,
Yeah, it just backs
we're backing it
everything
up and it's just,
Yep.
where does it end up? It ends up in an open area where it can settle.
Yep.
Well, and Bristol Drive dumps into that drainage, and of course, there is an old detention basin is what it looks like, in that subdivision. I haven't found the plat for it, but, it's definitely not, it does not appear to be functioning as a detention basin. It looks like it just flows through. So that could be exacerbating that problem. I know a lot of from just west of Summit, even up Broad Street, that drains to that. So I haven't looked into that one too much, other than that the pipe for COTC is there, and maybe there's some other,
Well, it makes sense because Summit has the same type of drainage issues, that whole stretch. Okay.
So you're recommending a drainage study
yes.
to figure out how much effect, what effect you could make by having a detention basin or retention at that point.
To see if the retention basin would be the way to go, or if, maybe we could upsize some pipes, maybe the water can get out, but that study would help us to understand what our options are a little better.
How much is
So
that?
I would say, yeah, I would try to get a proposal, so this being number 2 on the list and one that isn't going away, probably need to get a proposal for that.
Okay.
I don't know, I think Streets Committee, correct me if I'm wrong, we can make a recommendation for you to get a proposal. Doesn't mean it's gonna get approved by council, but we can certainly recommend that a proposal is acquired.
Do you think it would exceed the $10,000?
Yes. So the way that I had mapped these out in our 5-year CIP was, originally, about a year and a half ago, when I was hoping we had more money, I had, basically engineering, design in consecutive years. The way that this has worked out in the last iteration was, so this year we're doing the engineering for Graham Road, Kyle Moore. The following year would be construction for Graham Road, Kyle Moore. Following year would be the engineering study for Taylor Road for number 2, and then engineering the following year, then construction. So we had to space that out over more years to make it fit without, of course, nobody wants to talk about stormwater utility, but without having that funding source, I think it's
So
gonna be tough to
when do you think
accelerate
this is
that.
gonna get studied? Is that 2020?
Let's see.
If 19 is gonna get Calmore built, then 2020 it's studied, 21 it's fixed, or potentially
21
fixed?
would be engineering, and then 22 would be, I think that's how, I don't have that in front of me, but it's a fairly long timeline to get to these. Of course, some of them, I question what our responsibility is for them, but Taylor Road is one that definitely affects public infrastructure, and anything that affected public infrastructure was rated higher.
Okay. Alrighty. The next one is covered under your report. Bristol's, we've already talked about that, International Drive. Have we gotten any further with our businesses on, up there?
I have not
Do
reached
you know
out to
where
them.
that is possibly stalled out? What are we waiting on the ordinance to get?
Well, I
the
know we
teeth to
talked
go-
about trying to just go up and talk to them. I have not taken an opportunity to do that.
Okay.
So that's on.
I guess what I'm gonna suggest is after we get the ramp through and we do that, and I think there's a meeting that needs to be dedicated to drainage issues 100%, so we don't go through it quickly,
I agree.
and we can really have the budget to get, just kinda have it mapped out,
Right.
maybe before that meeting, and I'm talking about in like 2 months possibly, That we've got a priority, we've got basically, the funding mechanisms, you've got some pretty large numbers in here, but that's if, maybe there's a option one and an option two.
And my numbers are usually fairly conservative.
I understand, but just so that there's $1 million worth of work here easily, $1.5 million.
And I agree, and I think.
Oh, Halloon Lane by itself is $1 million.
Yeah, I can
Because
see
this is
that.
something that we just started putting together, instead of when we come to the meetings and talking about all the huge things just a little bit. That might be a good idea to put that one back until we can get through the ramp and everything else, and then really dedicate a chunk of time to laying that out, because I think, just with it has one of those looming feelings about it, like this is gonna get us at some point. So knowing really what's out there, so we can at least, when we get the complaints and the questions, we have researched the answers already.
So, let's just use Halloon Lane for an example. I would like to talk at least about the opportunities that would be out there if this was developed, for instance, for a subdivision. Instead of us going to spend $1.3 million to drain it, are we going to say we've recognized this, and anybody who brings this in as a plan is going to be required to do some substantial drainage requirements? That's kind of, without looking at this any further and anything else, that's what would be one of the alternates that I would put forward is, we're gonna be willing to close this road for the next, however long we're gonna see without development in the area. But I would assume if it's a farm, it's ripe for development at this point, and if that's the case, then there's probably a good option there for a development to solve this issue.
Yeah, I don't know where that falls on the zoning map, if that's supposed to be an ag district or not, but on the east side, there's Halloon Lane, of course, just runs back there, and there's already problems there. Ashley Lane goes off to the west. I've had some complaints back there for the ditches, but like those ditches are at a minimum slope. The slope through there is small, and there's just nowhere to do anything better.
It sounds like we're talking about major ditches and long,
Yeah.
runs of, to get that water out of there.
I was going to ask that anyhow, because there's an interest from a developer in putting a subdivision there on Summit
Oh, okay.
in that area. And knowing that we have, water issues over there.
Mhm.
Isn't that something, as they were coming in, that'd be like, I would think a number one thing they would
Well, the first,
ask about or have to know about before, you put a bunch of houses in
Well,
there.
the first thing that I think Alan or the city would ask is, where's your outlet?
Right.
Where's your outlet is inadequate to supply or to take the water from whatever development you're putting in.
Right.
So I would have a hard time saying, without knowing a lot more about this, whether they may or may not have an outlet. Doesn't sound like there's a good one.
No, it's right on the line, the Scioto Muskegon watershed boundary.
Right.
Of course it is.
And of course, it's just spotted with wetlands up through there because it's on that high plane that didn't drain well.
Okay, so let's, I would say,
Yeah.
for at least the street committee to try to, 2 months from now, try to target a drainage meeting.
In that one, do we also want to talk about small-scale drainage projects? Because I mentioned, I think, last time that or at least during council, that I was going to work on putting together a small-scale drainage projects. We've got several where it's just, put a catch basin, a couple hundred feet of pipe, which sounds simple, and each one's really not that expensive, but we've got several of them, and they start adding up. So I was looking to put together a list, if nothing else, just for scheduling purposes, but also so that we can be aware of how many of those we have and maybe try and prioritize them as well and see if we can, what we can afford.
I think it would be nice to have an encompassing list as we move forward, and maybe not just a list, and you guys are the creative ones with the charts, but some kind of diagram, right? It's a visual to say, the big ones, the immediate fixes. I don't know if we do it based on like emergent need or dollar range or both, or however we go about it, but it would be nice to kind of, as we go along, start putting this together.
I already have something for the major drainage projects, a spreadsheet where I've started like plug in years, projects, dollars, and I was anticipating doing the same thing for small scale. For this, I wanted to get it out and write, because we
Yeah.
know what the issues are and kind of
Right.
document that, but, next time, when we have that meeting, I'll plan to have a couple spreadsheets that,
That would be great.
give visual representation.
So
So
we
this will
can,
be called our damp list.
There you go.
oh, it's so depressing. Okay, then dump.
It's not the swamp like maybe we're proposing.
Yeah, no, we don't do that, but it is damp, that's for sure. Okay. Anything else on that and I would assume, and we'll talk about this at the end, but I imagine another month we'll have another meeting. We can talk about the particulars of this as we get closer to maybe having that meeting, that drainage
Yeah.
meeting.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna skip 12 for a second, just try
Okay.
to get some of these other ones.
Yep.
If we can go to Broadview Crossing drainage.
Okay.
What, you wanna give us an update on what you guys have found?
So the latest is that we have had some discussions with TJ Evans Foundation. They have more or less deferred to us to facilitate the discussion and resolution, in their words. So there's two separate issues we have here. There's specifically Brenda Sams and neighbors to the south, and then there's the three properties to the north. So we'll start with Brenda. Her issue and neighbors to the south is that basically the backyards flood and lay wet. Those backyards are in the 100-year floodplain, and there's really not, I'll just say that they're in the 100-year floodplain. The solutions that we proposed, we told Ms. Sams that we would be willing to drop a catch basin in on the public storm pipe that runs in an easement on the north side of her property, and stub out so that she could tie into that, and then she could, run drainage on her property, and neighbors could, jump onto that pipe and put, some yard drains in there if they needed. Or the other option that we saw was to, if she wanted to, basically put a swale or a French drain from her property to the river, as long as they had the foundation's permission for that. So I guess on that one, I don't see really anything that's the city's responsibility. Like I said, like I told her 2 years ago, we'd be happy to drop that catch basin on there for her to tie into. If she wanted to go through the park property, I don't see that that's the city's responsibility to do that, but we would certainly, I have no problems allowing that to happen or, facilitating that happening. Just, I don't think the city spending money on that would be consistent with what we've done in the past or should do in the future.
Okay?
Second issue,
And neither of those solutions are gonna solve a flooding problem, they're gonna solve a lay wet problem.
correct.
Right. And does she understand that?
I have said as much,
Okay.
that it's in the floodplain there and it's gonna get wet at times.
Okay.
The second issue is the pipe that runs from Foundation Park down across 3 backyards and then comes back onto Foundation Park before it hits the river. It appears to be an old field tile, who knows when it was put in. There is no easement we've been able to find across those backyards. So it's, in some instances, in some views, I guess, in one perspective, a civil problem. You can also see where it looks like the pipe was put in the low spot, which frequently they are. There's a little bit of a swale that runs roughly where the pipe is that comes in from the park. Somebody's built a bridge across it, and that bridge has been there, looks like it's been there for at least 10 or 15 years. So it looks like there is some natural drainage that went there, and then there's also a pipe that goes there. And the problem is there's a blowhole in the pipe where during a major rain event, the water comes up out of the ground, flows across the ground on those 3 properties, and then goes back into the pipe where we installed a catch basin or a yard drain here this past summer, and it gets to the creek. So on Foundation Park property, it is operating and flowing. It's just in those backyards where there's a blowhole, and it does go across land from that blowhole.
How deep is the pipe, Ellen?
2-3 feet.
How hard would it be to intercept the pipe on Foundation Parkland and put a ditch on Foundation Parkland and connect that ditch to the yard drain that you installed a year ago or 18 months ago, 2 summers ago?
Would involve taking out a lot of trees and roughly, see if I can get a distance in my mind here. 800 feet of pipe.
I'm saying open ditch.
Oh, open ditch. Well, about the same amount of open ditch probably. Fair amount of trees. I would assume that we have the slope to do it, because it'd be, you know.
Pipe works, the ditch will work.
Well, I mean, this is of course a straight line and we'd be, it takes the
Yeah.
hypotenuse, we'd be
Yeah,
taking.
we're taking
A
a
and B
little
sides.
longer, right.
This would be a longer run.
I just wondered if that's worth looking into,
And I
to pull that, I mean, if they're not gonna give us an easement for that pipe,
And I'm trying to remember, I think did I give that as an alternative solution? Of course, I put relocate tile, I did not put relocate and make it a ditch. So I haven't really looked into what that would take.
you think 800 feet of tile is 300,000?
Like I said, my numbers are conservative, I haven't looked into it that much. It might be more than 800 feet of pipe, that's just trying to go off memory.
Yeah, I would think you'd get 1,000, this is 18-inch, right?
Oh, and it's also, and it's not just going from the blowhole, it'd be
You
going
gotta
all the
go
way to
straight-
creek, and that's what this number included, because basically relocating the whole tile.
Okay.
I think it would be good for us to at least budget to replace the tile on park property at some point. It should, whether we just take it in its existing location or relocate it, I guess is a matter to decide upon. So I think no matter what we do, there's still gonna be some drainage that probably goes through there. Maybe putting a swale in there would redirect some of it.
Okay. We're not gonna solve it today, but I think that's an important piece to look at, just see what our, potentially if we can do something that's relatively inexpensive, a ditch that's permanent, that, is easy to clean and not on somebody else's property, those are probably all good things. I know that's not the easiest one. Okay, so that we can hit Suzanne's, before she goes here in the next 7 minutes.
Yep.
Let's talk about Main Street, which I
Main
know
Street-
isn't on your agenda, but I wanted to talk about it.
Well, and actually, you put it on the agenda for, you mentioned it at the end of the last meeting, but what I wrote down didn't quite make sense, so I
Okay.
thought we'd catch it in the other business. Anyways, we have confirmed with AEP that the easements are theirs and they're gonna be the ones that get them. They're not just gonna give it to us to go out and get signatures and notarized. But they said they're willing to go down with us and go door to door if we want to do so.
Okay, so with that, how can we get them, because they're not gonna volunteer to go, we gotta make them go. So how can we, do we have a game plan on motivating them? To give them dates and times and so forth?
I got that information today. I've not formed a game plan.
Okay. I think it's important to do that, because Chad's not gonna, he's not gonna wanna come out here and spend his afternoon if we don't make him do it. In my opinion. But, so, when you form a game plan, if you don't mind, let me know. I can certainly contact AEP, just the same as you can. But I would be glad to make sure that they're right there with us to get this done. And you're absolutely right, it's their easements, they're gonna go get them. But, if there are council people that want to help with that and can help with that, I would try to get a game plan together and see who can help. See who can go with you and with Chad to get these done and get them signed up and express to them the absolute
I can't wait till you
need.
can look at us and be like, when we go, how about Main Street? And you're like, done.
Oh,
I know it was here before you came, and I know that it's like this project that's like lingering.
yeah.
So I can't imagine that day when you say it's
Well, and I
done.
have listened to Mr. Barstow a number of times over the years. I've gotten to become familiar with his body language, and I have a feeling this is something that he's ready to push on.
Okay.
He's like,
Yeah.
I'm ready to go knock on doors right now. Let's just go.
Just get it done,
Well,
yes.
My thought is, a Saturday, and I believe AEP's willing to come out on Saturday to do it.
That could very well be. And they
And
come out
or-
in the evenings, so I wouldn't.
Or evenings, they're willing to come out either time.
Yeah.
So whatever we gotta do, let's come up with a game plan to get the 10 or whatever you've got left, or 18 or whatever you've got left to get. Let's try to knock out as many as we can.
Well, we should seriously set a target date to have it completed by and convey that to AEP. Just say, listen, you know, we would like to do this, so what are you guys gonna do to help us make that happen?
Well, and I remember
I'm-
way back.
I'm hopeful, so what I guess I would ask for it, I don't mean to interrupt you, is by the next council meeting, we have a game plan. Is that possible to do? That's Monday. Can we have a game plan by Monday? Doesn't mean we know, but let's have a game plan. Maybe talk to Chad, find out what is available and come up with our list of houses, and maybe Suzanne or Tim know these people and can,
I don't even know who they are.
so we just
We'll
need to know
figure it
who
out.
they
Get it.
are, where they are, so we can stalk them and.
I love the
List.
idea of a deadline, a realistic deadline. I remember, it was a year ago, 2 years ago, I think I had just gotten on council when we did a ribbon cutting to celebrate the opening of Main Street, but it really isn't the finale of Main Street. It was like, yay, the road's done, but the paving was done by the state. It wasn't like the entire project that was done. So I'd like to just have, if we're gonna do a celebration, I'd love to like plan that and be done, but I don't know if that's realistic, like just to have an end date. That would be awesome. That's
I
just
think
my
more of
2
it's just
cents.
setting some deadlines for ourselves so we stay on top of it is more, you know what I mean? Because it's one of those that's easy because it's not, knocking on our door to say, I'll get to that one in a minute.
No pun
Because there's all
intended.
the, yeah, no. Because, you know, there's some emergent things, but it'd be nice to get that wrapped up.
Can I ask a question before I have to leave?
Go right ahead,
It's an other business question though. I mean, like, it's kind of a general question.
go ahead.
Now that I am opening up that shop I have had, on West Depot. I've had several neighbors that like, while we're outside, we're putting up signs and we're doing things, you just get to talk to the neighbors on a different street. Like my house faces Main Street, that business faces West Depot. So in being out there a lot more, I get to talk to a lot more of the neighbors. So I have this like, I don't wanna say bickering, cause it's not really that bad, but it's like I have this, discussion going on between the neighbors. One is a business owner, and she wants to know what we're gonna do about the 2-hour parking, which is like 2 hours parking, and there's a couple of signs on West Depot. Then I have another that's a resident that lives in the apartments, and they don't have any parking now because the property that was purchased, that faces Main Street, that goes all the way back to Wood Street, is now owned by someone else. So all that parking that they were using back by Critter Cuts is off limits now. And so the residents in the apartment building are all using those 2-hour spots on West Depot. And so we have this little war going on. It's a little bit tense because the residents don't have any place to park, so they're filling all the spots on West Depot. And then the business across the street from us, she just wants to know when it's gonna be, maintained. So enforced, that's what I mean. So, I don't know what to do about it, because I don't know what answer to give them. We either need to pull the signs and get rid of 2-hour parking, or we need to enforce the 2-hour parking. And I know that's a Bruce conversation as well, but I'm just gonna leave that for you to kinda think about what to do, because we don't have parking, but I mean, we have the public parking across the street, but I don't know what to do about West Depot, and I kinda feel caught, you know, they're venting to me, and that's my job to bring it here. And so.
Well, and I wonder if it's not one of those situations, where when they put up the 2-hour, you know, parking signs, it's kind of a deterrent to long-term parking, but not really something we can enforce because it's a public street, such as the, you know, no through traffic signs. Well, you can't ticket anybody because it's a public roadway and they can drive through wherever they need to.
Right, and I don't think our police department, I don't know if they have the time to go down there every 2 hours and deal with 2-hour parking anyway.
I don't think so.
They don't, they're dealing with such big things compared to whether or not so-and-so. And I know that some of the residents there, they're lovely people in the apartment, some of them are, and they've got multiple cars sitting on West Depot because they don't have any place to put them.
I would imagine the 2-hour parking was because the businesses needed the parking to be available for their businesses to
Absolutely.
survive. And
Now that's
this
not happening.
apartments are supposed to have a certain number of parking spots for their residents,
Don't.
and
And that's
multiple,
that
multiple
apartment.
car residents.
You know which apartment.
That's what they have story lock for.
So
So
we have
I
conflict, like
I
with
think
the
that
neighbors.
my personal opinion is that the 2-hour parking is enforceable if you wanted it to be, if they mark tires and so forth.
It probably
enforceable.
is
But do we have the manpower to mark tires every
Right.
2 hours?
That's the Bruce
We
part.
don't have someone.
So, I mean,
So
but a
not-
resident's car that sat there for 3
This is not a me business, 'cause I don't
days.
even know what my business is gonna do. This is resident in one place and business owner next door.
Unfortunately for the apartments, I think the apartments lose in that discussion. Because they're required to have, I'm sure Scott will tell us that there is zoning in
Yeah.
place that says you have to have a number of parking spots
Right.
for an apartment
There are a
building. And it's
lot
not
of
the
zoning
residents
issues
that
in
have the
apartment.
issue.
Well, I was
It's
gonna
the owner
say-
of the apartment
Well,
complex that has the issue.
And if
Wow.
that's the case, do you then enforce it on the residents and ticket them when, or do you, go to the bigger and say, hey, you have to provide this, so we are,
And- And I'm not saying that he isn't providing the correct amount, but if residents have 2 and 3 cars,
Mhm.
that's not gonna be they're not gonna have adequate parking for
And I
them.
know they're frustrated because I can see it on their face when we say hi. They're frustrated because town is changing. More businesses are coming. It's not gonna get any quieter downtown. So I can see the frustration on the residents when they're looking for a parking spot next to their apartment. There's 4 apartments in that brownstone. And then I know the lady, Bobby's Dance Studio, they're extremely frustrated because they've got kids coming in and little kids walking down those streets.
And we have I've got similar complaints on East Depot, where the yoga studio and of course, the coffee shop are there, and people have said that, on Jefferson, that people are taking their spots, or people are parking in
All
front of
the
driveways,
residential
which,
houses.
of course,
and-
one of them isn't recognizable as a driveway, which unfortunately I told them to make it recognizable as a driveway, and then we'll.
Because
they
it's still
can
public
enforce it.
parking on the street.
It's still public parking on the street, right. So,
So it's a debate it's a conversation to continue, we gotta come up with an answer, but it doesn't have to be right now, so it's a seed that I'm gonna plant
Yep.
for you.
and just to continue on with that a little bit, so I've tried to look at like little parking areas that we could look into. I think most of our problem is during major events, and I've dropped the seed in Nate's ear that it would be great to put like a gravel parking lot in at the water treatment plant, where that big grass field is. That could help us out during the major events. Of course, it's not gonna help out all the way up Depot Street,
Right.
but I think you're right, it's a conversation that we're gonna need to start looking at, where do we park all these people?
Right, and as, the Main Street property that was sold across from the diagonal from the bank, that's
Yes.
gonna be Ivory Barn, and once a month, they open up and they put 200 people come into that place, and they will slam Main Street, that will seriously change downtown. Now, I'm not saying West Depot Street or East Depot Street is the answer to all of our parking, but it's the beginning of a conversation to look at before that comes into play. All right, thanks for letting me interrupt I appreciate that.
Okay. The RCC at Broadmoor and Hazelwood.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to my notes here. RCC at Broadmoor, we met 2 weeks ago and had a general conversation to basically make them aware that there are issues and try and determine the limits of those discrepancies. We're actually meeting again tomorrow with the folks at Broadmoor to try and narrow that down. There was some discussions about what was actually deficient, what's not deficient, looking in spec previously. So tomorrow we're hoping to really nail down what we're expecting to see moving forward.
So correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't this thickness as well as strengths that were the brakes?
Correct.
And then on top of that, we had surfaces that were raveling.
Correct.
And it wasn't an irregular surface also, so we were gonna get they're gonna have to scratch course and asphalt the first course and then pave it? Is that, am I hitting all the items?
So, plus or minus, the recommendation that I've gotten and I like moving forward here is there are places where there's not enough reveal on the curb because it's too high, so you wouldn't be able to get both your layers of asphalt in, because there's supposed to be an intermediate and surface course asphalt going in. So we're gonna tell them, we're gonna tell them what to do, but where we're gonna lead the discussion is mill the areas that need milled that are high, so we can get our, all of our asphalt in that we're supposed to get. Also at that time, check for areas that are raveling and mill those off if they're bad. And then cause we did cores on our own because we were suspicious that it wasn't gonna meet. And of course it didn't in areas, so I think now they need to core in accordance with the spec after they do that milling work to see what's left. And there's gonna be some areas where I think they'll be fine. The spec is, ½ inch to an inch defines the deficiency. They did do cement stabilization of the base. So if it's just the thickness, we'll probably give them up to an inch on the thickness. If it's the strength, I don't think the cement stabilization really factors into that. And we would hold them to 85% of the strength, which is in accordance with the spec. So yeah, have them core it, see what they come up with, and then figure the limits of those deficiencies, and then have them replace it with they're probably going to use like some kind of quickset concrete instead of RCC.
Conventional.
Right.
PCC, and then when you say quick set, you think you're gonna go a medium set or some kind of?
I think they'll probably go with the medium set because they're gonna, they wanna build houses, so they're gonna say, oh, hey, look, we took out the depths, and that's gonna be pretty obvious for us to check the depth once it's out of there and have them dig it out to depth. And then if they take cylinders, within 3-4 days, they'll probably be pretty close to the strength if they use medium set, and that's when we would allow them to start building houses.
So will you be dictating where they're taking cores, or will they just take them where they want?
It's in accordance with the spec, and I think.
So that's a square, for every one that's deficient, you do a square around it, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the spec gives the initial cores how often you're supposed to take those. So they may use some of the ones we already had and go with that same area where we know we're gonna be deficient anyways. And I think there's gonna be some additional ones that they've gotta take.
So Prime was up inspecting this when they were placing it, correct?
Mhm.
Were they taking any kind of notes on where they felt there was rutting occurring or any kind of thickness problems, issues?
So rutting would be the subgrade, is that what you're talking about? So the subgrade, they did cement stabilization, and the subgrade, we did a proof roll on, and the subgrade looked great.
So when they were when they were placing the RCC, the subgrade didn't have ruts in it?
Correct. The subgrade was in good condition. The problem is, I guess pardon the expression, they came in like cowboys and just get it done. They didn't string anything, they didn't use any lines, they just came in and started going to town. I think they did all of that in a day and a half, so they worked some long days. So Prime did note, they didn't string it, they had some issues with that, and just the methods. Aside from that, of course, they didn't use any curing methods.
They didn't do any
put
wet
blankets
protection
on it.
either. They did visqueen, that was it.
Right, which they didn't maintain very well either.
Right. Okay. All right, so Hazelwood.
So Hazelwood, we met with Pulte last week. They have some issues, not nearly as extensive as Broadmoor because they did use blankets. So all but one strength was fine, and that strength was questionable for the location of the core. It was at the end of a stub street, and they may have taken it too close to the end. So we'll figure that one out. The rest of them were thickness. There's a couple places they understand that they're gonna have to replace some, cut it out and replace. And then there's some areas that are close, and they've got a similar situation where they'll need to mill down to get a good profile, and then take some more cores, see where we're deficient. And again, on that one, because strength isn't an issue, we give them the full 1 inch variation from the plan on thickness.
Was that one also cement stabilized?
Yes,
Okay. So we're not talking about rutting in that point, that
Correct.
case either?
correct.
Okay. Good.
I learned a little bit through all this. Unfortunately, we allowed them to use 5 inches and 5.5 inches at Hazelwood as their plan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so sticking with the spec, there could be some areas where the RCC is only 4 inches thick, which we're only gonna allow because they have cement stabilization, which still gives me a little bit of heartburn, but what we're gonna do for both of these is not put any asphalt on for the first year. So we'll do all the replacement now. At driveways, they'll have to put wedges in so people can get into their driveways. But then that way we'll see if there's, anything we're gonna see, we'll probably see within the first year of all the construction.
Oh, yeah, with all the concrete and trucks.
Right, so then, one, not let them put the asphalt on, and two, I know I'm not a big fan of the extended warranties, but if we tie it to a bond, make them have some percentage of a bond along with that for an extended period of time, that might be a way to help protect us as well.
Hazelwood, you probably have looked at the spec, there may be a minimum. I mean, that may be a plus or minus, but there may also be a minimum thickness, because when you get below 5 inches, you've lost with anything. There's always a minimum thickness.
Right.
So I think if you do your numbers on your modules, on that, your 5 inches that's it. I mean, you can't be any less than that. I would definitely look into that,
Okay.
and because here's the question: if it's 4 inches thick, are they going to warranty it for 5 years? Because it's not going to be there in 5 years.
I think they'd have to.
Well, I understand, but I'm saying that may be their choice. The statement may be that's not what they want to do either.
Right. And we're meeting with them again tomorrow to walk that one.
Yeah, is this complete on this one?
It's complete general again, yes.
Yeah. Who's out there with you from complete?
Now, Complete was not in the meeting for Hazelwood. They were in the meeting for Broadmoor. They were not in the meeting for Hazelwood. That was just a rep from Pulte, and that was it. And then tomorrow, I think it's just the rep from Pulte. So the rep from Pulte seems to be working with us a lot better, I guess, in comparison. And he's like, hey, we understand we need to hold the contractor to what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
Yeah.
But I'll bet you if you talk to Columbus, they would tell you they wouldn't take anything less than 5 inches, period.
And I think in the future, all of our specs are gonna read 6 inches minimum, so that way you've got a little bit of flexibility to
Right.
accept some areas that are a little bit less. Unfortunately, they came with 5 and
Who's
5.
the engineer for Pulte? Is that him?
EH&T was the engineer.
So that's who I would call. Get their recommendation. If you called them and said, are you backing the street up with a 4-inch pavement section? And my thought would be that they would not. Matter of fact,
I would hope they wouldn't, but
they,
and I really didn't want to accept 4 inches, but at the same time, I didn't know how to be consistent and refuse it. Because I don't
Well,
think
it's
in the
fine. I
spec
mean-
calls out for,
here's the question. EMHT, are you gonna back this? Can you show me the numbers that show me 4 inches works? You designed 5 inches knowing the spec was plus or minus 1. So you must be telling me 4 inches is gonna work. That's how I would approach it. I mean, that's just my suggestion. Move on, because I know Mel's gotta go and she's not that interested in RCC, so.
I don't even have any idea what you're talking about.
Let's talk about.
The mayor's here and I still didn't curse.
What's that?
I said the mayor's not even here and I didn't curse. See, I'm following his rules.
You didn't curse? That's good. Let's talk about Licking Heights real quick. So, I know there's a meeting they reached out to me about a meeting on Wednesday, the 14th. I'm not able to go to that. I suggested that they invite Mel and they invite Tim. I think that Dr. Wagner suggested not to invite you because there was a potential conflict. I don't see any, Mel, but I'm not gonna argue with him.
The irony is that I'm already invited.
Good.
As a
Then you
As
saw
a-
what,
as a school person, yeah. So I think he's just trying to keep the line clear between council.
I don't think there's a line that's being crossed anyhow. So
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we can get maybe a report back from that meeting. I think it was good for him to put that meeting together.
Yeah.
And
Well, and we've had a number of meetings, I mean, I think these started in like last September, and kind of met with the architects and everybody along the way building up to it. So I have enough of a relationship with them, I think we're at the point in the process where hopefully we'll see some renderings and I can get an idea of what they're talking about and we can start that discussion. So I would,
So-
like you said, would like to start, having these meetings sooner rather than later. Maybe pretty quickly start getting, a special meeting maybe between the street committee and invite Licking Heights and the architect, or whatever it is we have to do, and take it from there.
I would agree. I would agree. And then I also, I'm gonna suggest that we bring in Licking County, the TID in Licking County. So that's Bill Lozier.
Should, and truly just asking, because I'm not sure what the best way to approach this is, should we start with the smaller group and then,
Just identify all the problems
yeah, and then,
and the
and then
wants
start
and the
adding
asks
people.
and the needs.
well, and that's gonna be the big thing, and then start, bringing in extra people as we go along,
Do you know if
just to keep
anybody,
the conversation under control.
do you know if anybody from the staff is invited to the meeting? Alan, do you know about this meeting?
We had a meeting last week with Dr. Wagner and the architect, just kind of and they did show us a general overlay plan that showed a few different entrances, and we talked about traffic impact study and how that would affect the intersection at Cable and Summit. And then, of course, the potential for turn lanes, which, from the conversation, it sounds like Dr. Wagner didn't think the school would be needing to pay for those. Of course, that's typically on developers, is what I.
Oh, yeah, we definitely, right. We need to, so the deal here, and so the
I
big
think
picture here
DJ's
is this gonna be turn lane after turn lane after turn lane, or is this gonna be something where the city and the schools say, you know what, a 3-lane road down through here makes the most sense?
That was
And,
exactly what I've been.
and that's really, I think, the biggest picture here, quite frankly, as well as the improvement to the intersection at Cable and Summit.
Mhm.
Well, and we have a lot, when we start talking about the school entrance, and the turn lanes, that's just the end point, you know what I mean? I mean, if you're going down through there in the mornings, I'm heading north on Taylor to turn right on Havens Corners, and it is a steady stream of traffic in from Havens Corners. And then when you get to the intersection of Havens Corners and Summit, my gosh, you can be 20 cars deep on a good day, just waiting to get through that intersection. So it's already,
Well, that's a big picture for that's a big
Yeah.
picture for the traffic study,
yeah,
quite frankly. I think that, you start looking at, how far away you wanna be for a traffic study to really think about what the impacts are.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, I wonder, are those, obviously it's still all traffic, but is it two different conversations? Because, as part of the school, we're talking about the
Yep.
local right there, what's created by the school. And obviously we have problems that exist outside of that.
right.
Certainly not gonna try and pin that on the school like we wouldn't on any developer, so how do we fund those?
Well, and that's kind of what I was thinking as we go through this. I feel like because we've kind of outgrown our pants here, right? So we've never really been proactive in the setup. So I think it would be really short-sighted of us to say, okay, right now we're dealing with the school project, so let's get this area, and not consider everything else that's going on as a city, so we can see whatever we do at that end and how it might impact what we need to do at this end later. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because especially if they're gonna develop houses off Summit, and, there's just so much coming.
Yeah,
We need
well-
to have a full, and not even just down, not on the south side, on the north side too, up to Morris.
I'm hoping the comprehensive plan will encompass a little bit of that
Me too.
and help us identify those areas, and then once we get like Mink and Taylor, get those, going, so we can start focusing on, okay, what funds do we wanna try and leverage for the next project, and what is that next project?
Right. I agree.
So the other thing was, and you and I had talked a little bit about potentially the school having some additional thought into entrances on Mink, working with the city to get those entrances, to get
Yes.
a permanent entrance, maybe gated, but at least an alternative secondary entrance for them off of Mink, because right now, even a second entrance off of Cable doesn't make any sense if the intersection is blocked and the other intersections, there's nobody getting there. They can't get in, they can't get out. I
Right.
mean, for safety, so there's a lot of things that
There's a lot of things to think about, and we've, obviously, when you're out there and you have, a huge event or something happen, you see the backup, and so you have everybody out there trying to direct traffic and keep things flowing, and then you have the kids and some of the staff that, use the gravel path onto Mink. So for emergency purposes, especially since that's gonna be our middle school, there needs to be a secondary access.
But I'm just thinking that
Very
in
good.
this meeting on the 14th, that might be a big topic.
Yeah,
And that way, then, things can be looked at, if there is a need or a desire to put a secondary entrance on Mink, there may be some improvements on Mink that need to occur. And I personally think that, I agree with Alan, that the turn lanes would be school requirements. That's an easy one, just the same as would be subdivision requirements. Even a signal at Summit and Cable, if the traffic study deemed it necessary, would be a school improvement. Now, the in-between sections, you know, you get your turn lanes and you get your divergent, you know, what am I trying to
Decel lanes?
yeah, your excel and decel lanes on your turn lanes. In between those, you might get a couple hundred feet where you have a start and a finish of a turn lane.
right.
That should be the city to look at that, to say, well, maybe they can help
We
with
need to
those
just-
infill areas and work together to figure out a way to make this thing, put something together that actually works.
Right,
And Cable
And
Road
look at
becomes
all of
something
our
works.
funding
And the school
options, see
could
if we
easily
can
give the
grant.
right of way on the north side of the road.
yes.
And that way, this all can happen. So that's really how I see the two entities working together to get it done.
Agreed.
So,
Well,
okay.
I will let you know how the 14th goes, and then we can.
And I
take it from there.
apologize, Dr. Wagner, I just can't.
Oh, no, that's, I
So-
get it, and I think I saw BJ on that list, but I'm not sure, so.
Okay, real quick, Mink Street 2 and 3, what's happening there, Alan?
You had those on the list, so I just put them on there, from last time, Main Street Phase 2. I was anticipating maybe something just to update.
Is this on the house?
Nope,
Okay,
Phase
what's
2
next?
is, the reconstruction from Broad to Havens Corner.
Oh, okay.
I had it written down at the end of our last meeting as a topic for this one. So, no, we've got the house as part of that one. Utility work is, going now.
Yeah,
Columbia
clearing
Road,
and
Columbia's
everything
out
else.
there. AEP's getting ready to get started on theirs. Supposed to be finished, by the end of April. It's currently out to bid for the construction contract through ODOT. Should be, I would anticipate a start date by June,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's supposed to be complete by October.
That's beautiful, that's outstanding. Would it? if-
We might have the intersection, hang on, I'm sorry.
Right. Do
Maybe.
we, know what they're planning to do with the railroad?
Yeah, the railroad's gonna make, they're gonna make an improvement crossings to the improvements to the crossings.
okay, I just know that's a really bad area.
Well, and of course, it's kinda like this now, as a part of the plans is, which one's on the west? Cleveland Road is getting kinda moved to the north and Adams will align.
Oh,
And
beautiful,
the
okay,
whole intersection's being built up over the railroad track, so that it's not,
that's
so
great,
bad.
okay,
yes.
that was what I was wondering. People ask me about that one a lot, I'm like.
I can't take credit for that one, but definitely a good thing.
Yes, definitely, cause that's really bad, okay.
And that's it for phase 2.
Yeah, I don't know what I was talking about with phase 3.
Phase 3 is, of course, the house. We got the asbestos survey back. There is some asbestos in there, of course. It's fairly minor. We've got an estimate to do that, I think, for like $2,600 or something like that to remove it. BJ is working with the contractor on that. They are at least 10 days out, so we're looking at by the end of March, we should have the asbestos remediation complete. And then it's just working with Shelley Company to, 1, schedule, and 2, negotiate price increases because their contract's 3 years old, which we were expecting. It's-
Right.
Okay?
Real quick too, how is the culvert holding up on Columbia Road? Or, Cable Road, sorry.
Okay, well, as far as I know, it's still in good shape.
Okay.
Jason's been checking on that and I have not heard anything.
Yeah, cause I drove over it today and it looked fine to me, but
Okay.
you're right, so,
Yeah, and as long as that plate's there, it should hold up, as long as we don't get another major rain. Cause
That's
the
what I
culvert
was-
itself, the culvert should be like this, it's like this. It's-
right, and it could, yeah,
Right.
so that's what, okay.
So, yeah, just hopefully we don't get any more rains and then, contract it.
Well, and I have to say that, the change in the text on the sign amused me, so I appreciate that.
That was
And
on
I had a
Jason.
lot of, kids say, Mrs. Carter, did you tell them to do that? I said, no, but it was a great idea. So.
That was all Jason, when he
I
told me
liked
that,
it.
I got a chuckle out of it myself, so. Good.
I liked it.
So the only other last one, and I, you know, I believe I've gotten a little bit of pushback on this, but I know the street committee at least talked about it, was getting some type of estimate or estimated amount that Stan Tech would be responsible for, not just this project, but Main Street also.
Mhm.
You know, I know everybody's busy, I know there's 1,000 things going on, but, you know, I think that there is culpability here on
Yes.
Stan Tech's part. They're big boys and girls, they should be at least notified. We should take the position, at least in my opinion, and I think when we met last time, the street committee was, I think I heard at least some,
I absolutely concur.
belief that there is something we should do something
Mhm.
to let them know that, you know, the errors that they made and the things that are costing us extra money now, they need to be at least brought to their attention and even hopefully filed with their insurance so that we don't have to absorb these costs. And I don't know what that number is, and I think that was our discussion last time was, you know, is this $2,000 or is it $225,000? I don't know.
Right.
I have no idea. But that's what I'm looking to you guys to really kind of think about and put together to say, we think it reasonably is this. And then and then it's really council's position, you know, determination then, you know, hey, should we go forward with this?
Okay, and I've got a call into Zets, unfortunately that call just happened today, so I haven't heard back from him, to look to see what the statute of limitations is on these. So what I'm wondering is if it wouldn't be better for us to wait until these are both done, that way we realize what the actual costs are. And if that's within the statute of limitations, maybe a thought.
Well, I think
I-
it's important, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
not to, but just that as we go along that path, I know that we've had, a number of new people come aboard since that happened. But having been here when that all went down with Stan Tech on both sides of everything, I know council at that time was, fully supportive of litigation
Okay.
against Stan Tech. We have a lot of new people now, so, there might only be a couple left from that, but if at least we keep a list of major things that they definitely left us out to hang us out there, right? So, you know, the house is huge. I mean, and that's out of control. But we need to keep that list up and make sure that we look into that. They should not get off the hook for that. And they admitted it at that time, that they apologized and so on and so forth, so.
To tell you that, well, I think getting in touch with Zets and finding out what the statute of limitation is from him, is very important. So that we know that, but at the same time, as time passes, I mean, let's for instance say that the statute of limitation is possibly 3.5 years from now, whatever it is.
Right.
We don't wanna wait until the half year, till 6 months before that limitation runs out to start putting our list together. That's why I keep bringing this up and keep trying to make it a point to say, you know, it's fresh in our mind. It's easy to put it in the computer as a spreadsheet and keep a list, and when we go back to it 2 years from now, it's gonna be 10 times easier than doing it 2 years from now. That's my opinion.
Okay.
And again, this is, I mean, obviously, it's not staff's decision, it's gonna be council's decision, and at that point in time, they may decide to do something. They may not, I don't know.
Well, and as time's gone by, I've certainly come more around to that, you know, initially it was, you know, only a year out, and we hadn't seen some of the extra costs that we're gonna have, you know, for the house, we would've had to buy the house one way or another, right? So it's like, well, okay.
Well,
But There's
maybe.
a lot of extra costs in that for sure.
Maybe,
And I've started to see.
maybe. I think there's an argument that could say we didn't have to.
Well, and when
Okay.
I mean, I think there's an argument, it's really, what is the benefit to us to buy that house? If we have gained a benefit by having that corner occupied, by the city owning that corner, then maybe there is no damage there.
Right, we could've done the widening to the other side, is what you're saying, so maybe we didn't.
And we
have
were
to.
absolutely told at that time that there was plenty of room for right of way, and that it would in no way impede
Okay,
that front, I mean, so we were told that one night,
Yeah.
and about a week later, I was like, oh my God, we're in his front yard, what happened? Cause you'd go down through there, pavement's in his front yard,
Right.
so,
And we've talked about alternate designs for signals. So there's other things that could have happened
Yeah.
that we didn't have to buy that house. Now, you make the argument on the other side that maybe that's a benefit to us. Whatever the case is, that's not for you and I and Mel to argue. That's for attorneys to argue, if we want to go forward with that. But at the same time, we need to know a list of things that we think, Ellen, both you and I know that the Main Street plans were atrocious. They were terrible, and we were fortunate to have a contractor that was willing to work with us to get that done. I mean, when Jobs and Henderson, puts their hands up in the air and goes, we can't understand what the heck they were trying to do, that makes them pretty bad.
no.
That makes them pretty
And,
bad.
yeah, I know Brian Linzo was adamant, so was Dan Hayes. I mean, there was people who were, well, obviously Mike Fox was, so,
And I'm not out, it's not a witch hunt, it's not that at all. I mean,
no, it's big.
it's,
there's damages.
guys, we've got costs, and this is a professional business, and that's what professional liability is all about. So, all right, Mel, do you have anything else before you go?
I don't.
Because once you leave, we have to close the meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
It's all right. I'm good with that.
It's cold out there, he's been at track practice for 2 hours.
Alan, anything else that you want to add?
I think.
Anything we need for the next meeting that you, so, next meeting, let's talk about that. Do you want to
Yes.
try to do that a month from now?
Yeah, we can
Is
do
that okay, or do you want to
Yeah.
try to do 3, or do you want to try to do 2 weeks from?
We could do 2 weeks, because the meeting is this Wednesday. So, we're talking about the Heights thing, yes?
Yep.
Yeah.
So 26th of March is 2 weeks. Is there, do you know of anything that's on anybody else's list?
Not that I'm aware of.
I know we're right in the middle of, is that a spring break for you guys? I mean,
That's it.
Easter's coming up somewhere in
That's
there.
our,
That's the
Easter
next
is
weekend,
that's-
April 1st.
April.
It's the following week.
Yeah,
I think-
26th is, first day of spring break, yeah, so.
20 what?
The 26th is the first day of my spring break, so,
I'm being a little bit,
yeah.
I don't wanna,
No,
schedule
that would
something.
be a good timeframe, so.
So the question I would have, Alan, is the 26th, what do you think you could have? I mean, would we have a game plan would we have AEP game plan? Hopefully that's by the 19th. And then we could really dive into that on the 26th a little bit more. What do you think we need to, I mean, obviously, if we're talking a drainage meeting, 2 months, we don't have to talk about that.
Right.
But will we have, you said the ramp is due back on the 23rd? That's what I believe you said.
Yes.
So we could talk about the ramp on the 26th. That give you enough time to really look at it?
No.
So let me make a suggestion that we let's go a month and then have it. So we would do April the 9th. Because isn't April the 2nd the council meeting?
Right.
Then the 9th and the 16th will be another council meeting. So I'm gonna suggest April the 9th,
What time?
5 o'clock again.
5 o'clock.
We should check Suzanne's, make sure she can do that, but she seems to be available at 5.
Yeah, that seems to work. Yep, I'm good with that.
All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Do you need anything else, Alan?
I was asking what specific items that we were looking for at that meeting, if there's, besides the AEP.
I think everything other than drainage is, I think we're gonna talk a lot about the Licking Heights meeting, we're gonna talk about the ramp, we're gonna talk about, everything but drainage, basically,
Okay. I was just
is
trying
gonna
to
be our
make sure I
major topics.
put together anything. So basically, it's what's already on the agenda, just updates and.
Hopefully, we will have gone through Oak Meadow, and we'll have Oak Meadow you think we'll have 90% plans by then? In a month? Okay, so, yeah. So we'll try to hit as much as we can on that day, except for drainage.
Okay, fair
All
enough.
right, so I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Walter?
Yes,
Carter?
Yes.
thank you.